Alright, very warm welcome. Final round of the November Casual Tournament. This is Group C, the players that don't have a point to their name just yet, but for one of them that will change after this game. It's Elmin, Palmar, Dryad, and Lady Volk. Palmar subbing in for Kennen, who was in this tournament earlier on but decided to drop out. Now this is an interesting map. It's a glass colony, and again there's not very much silicon. So we'll see what the players choose to do about that. There's a couple of nice, aluminum patches there, but not much iron. So I think I would expect most of this to be concentrated in the southwest corner.
To me, I'm founding Scientific and right above where Dryad did in that water and aluminum patch, and going straight into 3 farms, because you look at these prices
Yeah.
for food as well as electrolysis reactor, and look how cheap steel is.
And glass is low
That,
as
get
well.
everything set up. Yep.
Yeah.
Get everything set up, and then you get to HQ2. You can crank out three of those reactors.
So
and
this
you
is
have
interesting.
So much money.
This is interesting. Elmin's gone level 1. Why are we waiting? Oh dear.
Food.
Palmar chat. Palmar's. Oh no, that's unfortunate. Oh, that's really unfortunate. He's not founded.
Uh-oh.
Oh well. There's nothing to be done about it, I'm afraid. So yeah, Elmin has gone into 2 farms, level 1, which is what you said, but he didn't go the expensive.
Absolute correct way to do. I still would have done it
Yeah.
as a scientist up there, just
Yeah.
because you don't have the water cost. But
Yeah.
he's got the right idea of going for what's profitable.
Yep, a more conventional start from Dryad, who has gone into iron and steel. But again, they're not enormously profitable. Palmar has got to 2. There are 2 carbon that are low nearby, so it isn't the end of the absolute end of the world for Palmar. But yeah, it's not ideal for him. Lady Volk's found is kind of interesting. She's gone into the 2 food as well, but she went into the single high carbon that is not quite adjacent to the base. But that's probably not going to be enough carbon in the long term, particularly with the unfortunate situation of Palmar, who's not going to have enough carbon either, so I would expect that price to be high very quickly.
So I want to point out, I looked over at, if you take a look over at Elman's base, here's one thing. I love the fact that he went into food early. Here's what I don't like. I don't like that 3rd greenhouse farm. Essentially, it puts a giant black market target on, hit me here. What I would have preferred is he has an iron mine at the bottom. What you do is go into 2 food at the top and 2 reactors on the bottom. You don't need iron right now. Iron's at $7. And really focus on what's making money, then go into your iron later. And
Agreed. And food honestly isn't going to last very much longer. With Lady Volk in a triangle, yeah, like it's not even all that profitable anymore. It's only $30 a tile and falling very rapidly. There is the black market that you were mentioning. Dryad puts that down on him. So yeah, that's a bunch of time that he's going to be wasting now, trying to do something about it. He's going to electronics level 3, which I can kind
not
of...
read it all. Nope. Fuel and reactors are
yeah,
what
there are definitely better options. Like, there are much better
Absolutely.
options.
I'm okay. So I'm okay with him going into 2 steel, because you can rotate that out when you have enough. When you have enough to get those reactors down. But they really need to be reactors instead. I don't like the placement of those though, because all you do is drop an EMP on the steel mar right there, and you really interfere with the food as well. So I'm not really liking the placement. He's also going. I'm okay with going into the 2nd aluminum because it's close enough to his base, but I don't know. I don't like the placement yet.
And
he doesn't have
there
a
are the
beam yet.
reactors. There are the reactors. Slightly too little and slightly too late. Dryad's already in them. Although he's not selling them down, so he's not selling his stuff down. So Elmin might get something depending on how much attention Dryad is paying to that. But yeah, I feel like Elmin just got caught in that food trap a little bit, and the black market really hurt him quite a lot. Put him behind.
Here's something I'd like to point out. Every single person right now is on their black market cooldown. Nobody has purchased anything. You have you have goons available. You have your EMPs available. You could be buying claims. All of these things are extremely valuable. The first thing I would be buying is claims because you can always, you can't get more claims later on after you hit HQ5. So
Yeah.
that's where I would go as opposed to a goon squad or something like that.
So the power situation is kind of interesting. Lady Volker's gone into a wind turbine HQ2, which I actually don't hate. I do hate the fact that she's put it all the way in the top right-hand corner of the map, for seemingly no reason. I guess because it's the only cliff that's basically on the map
Well,
in that part of the.
yeah, there's a crater there, but or a
Yeah.
cliff, yeah.
So yeah, maybe that could have been a solar panel closer instead.
Yes.
That would have been considerably better. Dryad is into 3 solar panels, and he's going to be paying off a bunch of his debt. Palmar is putting 2 wind turbines up now, but is in a little bit of danger of getting stranded. And Elmin as well does not have a whole lot of power going on. He's putting 2 solar panels up now, but he is HQ4 already, so he does have a little bit of a lead.
So let's take a look at Palmar first, because unfortunately he just had the misfortune of clicking the wrong button and founding the wrong HQ type. So what can you do if you're in this scenario? You're a scavenger, you just found it next to iron, etc., etc. What you can do is go about your business with trying to build the most profitable things. What you don't want to do is his other move. Well, I guess it's a little bit better than what I considered a second ago. Now that a dust storm's coming, because he is making 623 a second. If there was no dust storm, I'd just skip power, honestly.
Yeah,
You've
I think
got
that's
to be
fair.
able to try to advance as much as you can, make as much money as you can, because the only way you're going to outrun this disadvantage is to get to HQ 4 or 5 before other people. You're just in a bad spot, unfortunately. So, and you have so much debt already. So,
Yeah, I mean he is paying down that debt pretty quickly, but yeah, even so. Um, Lady Volk just not quite been able to make any money from that power. She's overcommitting again into the 2 more wind turbines near that one. She might be able to make a little bit of money off that, but even then, I think that's difficult to justify. Um, what else is happening? So Dryad decided to switch out his solar panels for the wind turbines just on flat ground with very weak wind. Um, that's a lot of resources to use on something that's quite marginal.
yeah, it is. I mean, they're decent in that they're making 1.2, but as soon as that goes away, then you've got nothing.
Yeah,
And the other thing is, Dryad, I would argue, shouldn't be in power right there anyway. Or I'm sorry, I would have left the solar panels. That's totally fine. But you're not going to make any money off of power anytime soon because you have 68k debt. What I would like to see instead for Dryad is blaze forward as quickly as you can and get to HQ5, because that's when you get so many more claims than everybody else.
yeah.
So
You
rather
get
than
6.
trying to make money off power based on his found, he was never going to make money off of power just based on when he found it. So
Yeah, and Elmin's kind of gone with that. He's making enough power just to sort of tread water. Not really, with the 2 solar panels, it's not a whole lot of power. So he's sort of hanging around B det, but he's pushed to HQ5, and that's really
yes,
where expansive players shine. The quicker you can get to HQ5, the better off you're going to be.
yes,
He was making a bunch of steel. He's not making quite so much anymore because it got frozen out. I think that's the one advantage that Dryad has potentially. Like he is making a lot of steel and it's very profitable.
yes,
What are offworlds like? They're not that good. So 30k offworld launches
yeah,
is not something that it's worth committing a whole lot into, but still worth thinking about.
yes. This is another instance again where if you, let's say you go scientific in one of those 2 patches right there, it's another consideration to have gone scientific is the fact that you try to check the off-worlds if you can before you found, because if you're looking at it and you don't have good off-worlds, that means you need to make your money on-world, and that's where you're going to be the most profitable if you can get like a scientific or an expansive or something like that, where you get either a bunch of claims or don't have to pay the resource costs. So that's another consideration for that. So Lady Volk, I did want to say, if presumably she um, watches this again later, the wind turbines, the big reason that those are not the best is not only can you not really rotate them later on, it's also better if you had just taken solar panels right next to your, so they would be up faster and you would be able to make money faster before the power crashed out. So.
And often with scavengers, it's better to make wind turbines because you're making carbon anyway, or you're bringing carbon in anyway. But honestly, Lady Volk's carbon is so weak that the carbon in real terms is as expensive as the silicon would have been.
Yes. And the other thing is, there's for Lady Volk, there isn't enough. You weren't bringing in enough carbon to justify being able to use all of those carbon. I mean, you're talking about 80 carbon in order, for each of those wind turbines. So essentially, what you're doing is you're slowing down your expansion, which ends up hurting you in the long run. And it took so long for those to get built and for it to get out there. And the dust storm was essentially missed, so that's what ended up setting Lady Volk back a bunch. So just something to keep in mind.
So we just had a robbery at the stockpile, and that's made a bunch of things very expensive. One of which is chems, and chems are pretty good right now. You can see Dryad's one of Dryad's big advantages is that he has actually improved his chems with the optimization center, and they are making $200 a tile right now. They are very, very profitable. He's also the demand for chems is also going to stay high.
I want to note that Dryad has been pinging Elman mercilessly with EMPs.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Absolutely merciless, which is good because Elman should be considered the one of the other targets at this point.
Although I think the last
Dryad
one was Lady Volk. Yep, he's building
he's
building a lady. He's building an off-world right now. It's pretty conspicuous, honestly. It's kind of by itself. It looks like a patent lab. So yeah, not the stealthiest placement there, but still that's a big deal that he's got that up early. One thing I would say, Elmin, he needs to really look after himself here, Dryad, because Elmin has a bunch of money and can majority buy him if he can't defend himself. And he's committing a lot of resources into the off-world. He is defending himself now, by the looks of it. He's just about going to have enough. But had Elmin attacked at that point, and he's had a bunch of money for a while, that could have been bad news.
Wow. So, look at that carbon price.
Yeah, I was going to say, carbon and silicon are both insane, and this is what I was saying about the carbon. So, Lady Volk and Palmar both needed the carbon to upgrade, and they both had very poor carbon. So carbon was always going to be very good. Like Lady Volk's getting 3 a second, and I think Palmar's getting 3 a second as well. So yeah, in both cases, that's an awful lot of carbon that is going to be needed, and not very much that's being got. And also there were a bunch of wind turbines that were put up, further making it a really scarce resource.
Now, worth noting that Elman has carbon scrubbing, which is actually pretty fantastic considering the carbon price, because he's the only one that can take advantage of these great electronics prices and the good carbon is the good chemical process.
Yeah, carbon scrubbing's frankly quite insane. He's also getting superconductor, which is interesting because he doesn't have any power up at all at the moment. And there's a bunch of debt in this game as well. Elmin's in C, Palmar's in C, Dryad's in D. Lady Volk is actually making power money now, and has a lot of money. The issue is that her upgrade is nearly $150,000.
Yes.
Because carbon is so ridiculously high.
So here's what you do if you're Lady Volk. What you do is you go into a patent lab, and you get slant drilling.
Yeah.
Slant drilling takes care of all of your problems because you can put a tile down and then slant drill off your high. Suddenly you have plenty of carbon in that case, and that's how you end up fixing your scenario.
And nobody else is researching it either. One other thing that Lady Volk has, look at the colony! Look at the colony! Look at the colony!
Look. There we
pleasure
go!
domes.
We got through to somebody. Look at that.
So yeah, these are really, really good pleasure domes. 2 expansive and 2 scavenger players means that pleasure domes are very, very, very worthwhile. And with power only at 110, That is a really
Um,
good move. So yeah,
I'm
along
so
with the
happy.
slant drilling, Lady Volk really should be investing in virtual reality as well, because that would make those truly insane.
I'm so happy about that. So I need to point out something for Elman. So Elman was in pretty bad debt problems,
Mm.
and
The
it looks like
superconductor play.
now Elman's back to A.
Yeah,
So which means that Elman paid off a bunch of debt.
yeah.
The reason you don't want to do that is you have a C stock, you have a C bond rating, and you have a bunch of cash.
No, no,
First, what
no.
you do?
I think he paid it off with his superconductor solar panels. I think that's what happened.
Oh, he did. Oh,
Yeah,
okay, never mind. Oh, okay, good. Never mind. I thought he took a whole bunch of cash and essentially paid it down versus.
I
Um,
don't think so. I'm not absolutely
okay,
sure, but I don't think so.
let's see how much he made on power. Uh, purchased 100. Elman has purchased 110K, sold 57K.
Oh, maybe he did. Maybe he did manually pay debt
Maybe
down
he
then.
did. Well, let's assume he did. I'm not sure if he did or
Yeah.
not. But in that case, what you do is you want to make sure while your stock price is low at a C or D range, you take your cash and buy your own shares first.
Yeah.
Then you pay off your debt.
Oh gosh, that's a Marsquake, um, and that is really interesting because like suddenly there's a bunch of things that are just very 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 profitable on world as well as off
Yes.
world. So Dryad with his two off worlds doesn't have such a huge advantage with those, even though they're 43,000 a launch, because there's a bunch of stuff on world, and most notably Carbon, that is just insane right now. And Lady Volt's actually going to make a bunch of money from that, and her stock price is very competitive as a consequence.
Um, I would also like to point out in this case, Dryad is going for a second off-world, which I don't think is the best move. Here's why. Number one, spies are super cheap.
Yeah,
Number two,
he's in D-Debt.
you're in D debt.
Yeah.
Whenever you're in D debt like that, you're essentially building an off-world so somebody else can have it. All they have to do is spot it. So
He
that
does
ends
have
up
thinking machines, but even so, it's worth it for
yeah.
other people to mutiny those off-worlds.
Nonetheless, that just means you're giving somebody an off-world for half the time, but you're still giving somebody an off-world.
Yeah.
And let's say that they don't, that mutinies aren't 50K. Well, EMPs are still 14, so
Yeah.
you can slow them. You can slow it down enough, and essentially, Dryad going for the second off-world gives it to Elman. Elman has a good approach where he's been optimizing all of this time. You want to look at optimization centers when all of your on-world prices are this great.
Yeah. Although I don't agree with his specific optimizations. I think fully optimizing
You don't like
silicon
food?
is a well. I look more at the
Oh,
silicon, which he's only making 1.5 of anyway, um, and yeah, spending that amount of chems to essentially give you 1.5 silicon a second seems to me to be a mistake.
oh yeah, I
I think
agree.
it goes into, it's that money's much better spent going into electronics optimization, into chem optimization, into food optimization.
Yes.
Although
Um,
he's doing food now as well.
that's a really good point you bring up in terms of optimizing base resources. A lot of times, base resources are the things that people can get more of a little bit later on. Let's say they get an extra claim, or they can very easily crash things out. I'm a little more skeptical of fully researching anything, but especially not like a base resource.
Yeah.
Um,
So Elmin is about to buy Dryad, and I think he's
yes.
about to lock this game up in
Oh
practice.
yes.
Lady Volk is some of the way to the buy of Palmar, and it looks like she might get that, but she's about to get attacked by Elmin, who's going to have a full subsidiary. Not only a full
Yes.
subsidiary, an expansive subsidiary with two
Yes. With
off-worlds.
two off worlds.
Yeah. So I think this game is going to be Elmin's without too much doubt. A lot of credit to both Palmar and Lady Volk in this game for coming back from some very difficult early game scenarios. Palmar with the wrong HQ found, and he's made a very good fight of it in spite of that. And Lady Volk, who used a couple of advantages that she had to very good effect, most notably the pleasure domes and the power situation, and she did eventually make money off power.
Yes.
But but even so, it was not quite enough to come back from what was two very good expansive founds.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting how long it took the AI to transition Dryad's wind turbines that were making nothing into food. And of course, now that it's transitioned everything into food is like $21 a second, so and falling fast. So now it's all half of them are auto offed, and it's just interesting to see how the AI is dealing with this. I wanna know how long it's gonna take till the AI just scraps everything. Like,
Yeah, well, it's happening right now, going into chems and a bunch of other stuff as well. Because yeah, like the food was optimized as well. That was why the AI thought that
yes,
was profitable.
yes.
And it very quickly got saturated with like 16 food a second or something ridiculous that the AI was making.
But it's interesting because as awful it was that happened, it then created its own market with steel because it had to buy a bunch of steel just to transition out of it again.
Yeah, wow,
That
look
was
at that
not
spike.
very
Good grief.
high. That was pretty miserable, and it doesn't even have nanotech either. So oh well.
So I think
So in this, wow.
the subplot here is whether Lady Volk can buy Palmar before Elmin buys Lady Volk.
And I think that the answer is no, because
Yeah,
Elman has so much money and 92% on Lady Volk, and in that case, I
yeah,
mean, it was already over. Dryad is making 2,325 a second, so
yeah. That's an insane
it's
amount of
hard to
money.
compete with something like that.
So probably next launch and then a little bit more. That will be the
100%.
end of the game. Elmin will take this one, so he will finish top of the final Group C standings.
Almost. Well, he still has to beat. He still has to buy Palmar, but yeah, it's game over.
Oh yeah, that's true. Sorry, yeah. Probably
We
should
still have
have
one more
taken that account.
obstacle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he does. But Palmar is not a threat, unfortunately. Um, and there is the buy on Lady Volk, and very quickly Palmar will be eaten up as well. So I'd be
So
interested to
let's.
see how the Group A game has gone.
Yeah.
Which of the two players on 3 wins will have taken that one? I'm not exactly sure how the scoring works. Whether it's whoever wins the final round game, whether it's one of those two or one of the others wins the
Mhm.
tournament as such, or whether it's just whichever one of those two wins.
Mhm. I don't know. That's gonna be interesting to see. Oh, you know what? On this game, I want to point out one other good thing for Lady Volk. Lady Volk was the only person that actually took advantage of putting their off-world next to warehouses, and
Ah,
since it was built so late, it doesn't really matter that Goon Squads are 70k because
mm.
the mutinies and everything you have to attack it were essentially way too expensive. So that was a fantastic job. So
Yeah, that's true. And it seems to happen quite rarely. I know the AI does it quite a lot, but it does seem to be the default to build off worlds next to your base, um, even when there's a good warehouse situation. Players sort of naturally tend towards building them next to the base, even when it's not the best thing.
yep,
So there we go.
good game, everybody.
Elmin wins that one, and I think with the double, I mean Elmin has, I think in every game we've seen him play, he's gone expansive,
Yes,
and I can,
yes, he definitely favors expansive.
yeah, yeah, and I can sympathise because I do too.
I
But
actually don't. That is my least played faction, and I'm not really sure why. But I mean, there are a lot of advantages, particularly in a long game. But
yeah,
for
yeah,
whatever reason, I just don't do it.
I think that's
It's
the
weird.
thing. I mean, certainly for me, like if I can keep up in the early game, so the early game is about keeping up, and if I can do that, then you're all set as an expansive player generally,
Mhm.
because you get enough late game advantages. And in this case, I mean, the two scavengers were both behind early, and whenever a scavenger is behind an expansive player in upgrades, it's usually bad news for them.
Yes.
And that was pretty much what happened here. Um, and yeah, Elmin sort of taking advantage of the early food and the early water that he had, was able to. I almost want to say that like the level 1 decisions that these guys made in terms of where they chose to put their claims. So Elmin built 2 farms, whereas Dryad went into Steel, which was like $30.
Mhm.
I think that went a long way towards deciding this game.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that's about it for this. I guess.